236. And you shall practice equitableness, being fair/fairness, in all things, just as you have to observe equitableness, fairness, between man and woman, because both of you shall be equal and none given precedence. Therefore the same rights apply to woman as to man. The woman shall not be subservient to the man, and vice versa. Therefore the man shall not use the woman and her womb in slashness and selfishness for fulfilling his own pleasure, like a field which is plowed and sown at will for one's own enjoyment. The same rights shall prevail amongst and between both sexes also during sexual intercourse. Therefore equality in all things applies to man and woman, just as an equivalent value is given to both in the conjoining of bodies in order to beget offspring, or for the stimulating and joyful enjoining and healing fulfillment of pleasure. 237. And as you shall practice equitableness, being fair/fairness, in all things, so you shall practice equitableness, being fair, to your children, because they are no less inferior than you. Therefore you shall treat them as a people of your kind, human beings, just as you treat those who are no longer young or grown-ups, and are not children any more. 238. And as you shall practice equitableness, being fair/fairness, in all things, so think about your life and your death, because after your birth both are unavoidable for you, so that you must ponder them and find the path to both income and peace. Therefore practice equitableness, fairness, on your descendants and relatives, because when the time comes for you to depart from life you shall have settled everything, so that all your bequeathed chattels and your wealth may be distributed in equitableness, fairness. But if you, who are able to write, prepare a text with instructions on how and to whom your legacy should be handed over in whichever particular amounts. If you are however unable to write, then announce your last will to someone who can write, has been taught to write, so that he can record everything in writing, which is your final decision. If you leave anything behind, then make a writing testament before you lay yourself down close to death, and make the writing testament for man, woman and child, for the parents and close relatives, or for friends, and for whatever you wish, in order to act in equitableness, recognition/approval/fairness. When you make the writing testament, or have it made, then act in equitableness, fairness, and do not cheat any of those who remain behind, so that no discord, bad blood and strife, or even worse, may flare up. And those who remain behind shall not fall prey to avarice, and not seek juridical procedures to break the last will of the deceased for their own benefits. And the survivors of the deceased shall not be at odds with one another and quarrel over the wealth and chattels, because such doings are not worthy of people of your kind, human beings, and are only done by ones without equitableness, unfair ones/irresponsible ones/ones without fairness, and unknowing ones who are reviled by the people as scum. And as you should practice equitableness, fairness, in all things, so also practice equitableness, fairness, in that you do not steal, destroy or falsify any writing testament that a human being has left behind after his or her death, in order to settle everything. Anyone who does this is committing an outrage against themselves and the truth and his or her fellow human beings, and there is never any boon from it. And those who do it will truly have a heavy guilt placed on them, which they will find difficult to bear. 240. Truly, however, those who practice equitableness, fairness, and fear that the person who has prepared or had prepared his writing testament, for after his dying, and therefore for his goods and chattels and wealth for the survivors, has created partiality or inequity for the survivors through his writing testament, that person shall confront the person who produced the writing testament, and shall reveal the correct way to him. And if survivors fall into enmity due to partiality and inequity of the deceased and his writing testament, then rational people shall promote peace between those affected, so that they will be forgiving and compassionate to one another. 241. You believe that fasting is prescribed for you, and it is maintained that fasting was already prescribed for those who have gone before you. But this is by no means the truth, because it has been from time immemorial only a discourse by those without equitableness, unfair ones / irresponsible ones / inequitable ones, so that you would remain with your God or in God through your belief. 242. Truly, fasting is no law, although it is a recommendation which serves your health and the well-being of your body, so that you do not practice gorging and gluttony and satisfy yourselves with a good measure. Therefore, according to your own discretion, take a number of days determined by yourself, during which you only consume moderate nourishment once a day. However, whoever is ill and those who would have a difficulty in withstanding the fast shall refrain from doing so, and do it if it is necessary for them. And fasting does not apply to children and those hungering in misery, because they require nourishment and cannot do without it. Therefore let children and those hungering in misery eat in voluntary observance of the laws and recommendations of the primal power creation, and do a good work for them. And fasting is good for you if you wish to understand it, for your health, for your body and everything that is within it, as well as for your discipline and taming. 243. And there shall not be any particular time for fasting, but it is a recommendation given guidance to you that fasting shall be performed when the requirement or health stand behind it. Therefore they apply as proof of direction and differentiation according to which fasting shall be performed. Whoever has the want for fasting, or because his or her health demands it, or because it is given, for whatever reason, he or she may fast for a predetermined time depending on his or her own free will or the instruction given by someone knowledgeable in medicine. However, whoever is suffering from an illness shall not take part in fasting, or only do so according to the instruction of someone knowledgeable in medicine. Therefore wish to make it easy and not difficult for yourselves, and perform fasting according to the necessary extent, so that you are rightly led and that you may be thankful for it. 244. And if you are asked about the reason for fasting by the unknowing ones, then say that it is a matter of your health, and tell the questioner or the requester that they shall listen to the guidance of the recommendations for fasting and be knowing in them, so that they may turn to the right path. 245. Also in the time of fasting, it is permitted for you to go into your woman or your man if you are rightful in your bond with one another, connected to one another. Therefore do not act in inequity, unfairness / irresponsibility against yourselves, but be kind-hearted and practice equitableness, fairness, on yourselves, and grant yourselves easement in your union with one another. Therefore you may go into one another also during the time of fasting, and strive for what is sufficient for your good, and eat and drink during the time of fasting in an appropriate minimum extent, so that you will not be prevented from fasting due to great hunger. And when you complete your fasting, then the day may return to its given course, although you should restrict the amount of nourishment so that you do not suffer any injury. These are the limits that are given by the recommendations, so that you do not exceed them, and accept them so that you will be protected against everything that harms your health and well-being and brings you evil. 246. And do not devour your wealth amongst one another through falseness and lying and deception, and not through greed and avarice, and do not offer your wealth for bribery, not to those without equitableness, unfair ones / irresponsible ones / inequitable ones, and not to authority in order to be granted advantages and right while in the non-right, because thereby you knowingly, consciously, wish to devour parts of the wealth of the other people. Live at all times in equitableness, fairness / responsibility, and honestly, and do not dare to commit misdeeds in order thereby to increase your wealth by striving to swindle the wealth of others through non-right.